This is Sigma's original 35mm f1.4 art lens for Canon mount. This is actually it's a landmark lens. Basically Sigma, if you aren't aware, was, as a third-party lens manufacturer, was a somewhat B-level lens maker, very competitive pricing with okay quality. When they revamped their line, starting with this lens, they became a premium lens maker with still amazing prices, incredible build quality. This lens has been with us for quite a long time, and we've even used it through the switch from Canon to Sony as our main shooting systems. Along the way, we ended up picking up the native E mount, Sony full-frame version of the Sigma 35mm art. And to be honest, I've been very happy with the lens. I wouldn't say it's my favorite 35mm lens of all time. I'd give that crown to the spectacular Canon 35mm f1.4 L series version 2, which is just a fantastic lens. But we've been very happy with the Sigma Art Series lens. Today, we have Sigma's brand new, designed for mirrorless exclusively, 35mm f1.2 for Sony E mount system. What we're going to do is take a quick look at this lens, give some of our impressions, and give you a rundown of everything that we found so far with this lens. Okay, so let's start with the lens itself physically. As you can tell, it's a pretty large lens. The Sigma 35mm was always a decent size. I mean, on the Canon mount without a lens hood, it's actually really compact lens by today's standards. By the time you get the Sony E mount version, you're talking something that is a little bit longer. It is a little less comfortable, a little more awkward, I think, to use when mounted to the camera. And of course, now with the 1.2, the lens, I mean, it's got a good weight to it, and it's clearly quite a bit larger. In terms of size, when comparing it to the rest of Sigma's lenses, it compares, I think, most closely to something in between the 50mm art and the 135mm. In terms of on the camera and in your hands, you can definitely feel the weight difference from the original 35mm art lens. It's got a definite heft to it. There's no denying that. Is it too much? You know, I don't think so, but that's just myself personally. Although, of course, I would prefer the smaller size and weight. New for this lens is the new AFL button. Basically, that's something that the Sony G Master lenses have had for a little while, some of the higher end lenses. This will allow you to basically program various different functions if you want to use it, or just use it as an AF lock button. It also includes a clicky manual aperture ring, which is also the first for these Sigma Art lenses, and you can actually have it clicky or declicked. Okay, so let's get into it. We had a chance to work with this lens a little bit and put it through a few tests today. I guess the big question is it worth almost double the money as well as the size and weight disadvantage over the Sigma f1.4 35mm art? Let's take a look.
Okay, so when it comes to field of view, we did notice that the original 35 is a little bit wider. This seems to be more of a maybe 36, 37 mil. When it comes to autofocus in general, this is one of the snappiest lenses I've used thus far. It jumps right into focus right away. When we came to using it in AFC, it seemed to jump into focus a bit quicker than the original. That being said, the older lens was quite fast as well. AFS seems similar. We don't really use AFS, but we didn't notice really much of a difference between the two lenses. But when we're looking at the images afterwards, we didn't really notice too much of a difference, but the initial jump seemed to get there a little bit quicker. So when it comes to autofocus noise, it's pretty silent. You got to really put your ear right up to it to hear anything at all. You might hear a tiny little when you get really close. It's a very quiet lens. The minimum autofocus distance is basically the same as the original. It's quite close, right on point with the original. So when we tested the bokeh with this versus the 1.4, when we were actually out in the field using it, we weren't really noticing too much. When we brought it back in and started looking at it, There is definitely larger bokeh when you have lights in the background. It is a little bit larger. After bringing it into the computer and putting it on a large screen, definitely the bokeh was better with trees and bushes in the background, more pleasing, more smooth. It looked way more harsh with the 135 1.4, way more smooth with the 1.2. We were really impressed when we brought it in and saw the images on the 27-inch 5K monitor.
I always thought the 35 1.4 was good, but after a while doing group photos, things like that, to people in the middle it'd be great, but once you're looking at like 3 or 4 people off to the right or left, you almost think that you're out of focus, but really I think it's just the lens that was making it a little soft. So when we brought out this guy today, tried it out, corner to corner, this thing is tack sharp. So we did a brick wall test with this. Now with that test, to make the 1.4 look as sharp as the 1.2, we had to bring this guy, the 1.4, down to an f4 to get to be pretty much the same sharpness as the f1.2, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Even with the vignetting, that's fine. You can adjust that later. One negative about the lens is the barrel distortion on this. It is, you can't miss it. Let's just say that. Once we brought this into Lightroom and looked at it, it was so evident that this guy handles it so much better. Now the barrel distortion, it sucks, obviously, but you can fix it. It shouldn't take much to fix that. So if that's gonna be a hindrance, don't worry about it. Just take 2 extra seconds in Lightroom and you're gonna be good to go. Now when we talk about fringing for these lenses, when you look on the back of the LCD screen, you're not gonna see it, but as soon as you bring it into Lightroom, you're gonna see a pretty hefty difference between the 2 lenses. I've been so used to using the 35 1.4 and having to deal with the fringing on here, which is quite a bit more than you have on the 1.2. So now just one less thing I'm gonna have to worry about if I were to use this lens.
Is this lens worth double the money almost of the original 35mm? Well, that's going to be a personal decision for everybody.
At first when we were out using the 2 lenses in the field, we were thinking, or I was thinking myself, is it worth that extra money? Until we brought it in and started looking at the images and how sharp the images were compared to the 135 1.4 at the edges, which when shooting weddings and group pictures, we noticed, you know, a lot softer images at the side. This thing was blowing them out of the water. That right there is one good reason I would spend double the money.
If I did not already have this lens, would I buy the 35 1.2? Oh, if the wife would let me, probably.
You know, there's a lot to love about the old 35mm, but when you get over the size and weight and of course the financial expense of the new lens, and you start really getting some of the images back and looking at those results, especially when we looked at some of the background foliage, the corner to corner sharpness, I mean, there's a certain level of quality that Sigma is delivering here that you just don't see in a lot of lenses today.
It's such a good lens. The size,
if you're looking at buying this lens for, you know, just the 1.2 over 1.4 or that extra third stop of low light, I would say no, that's not a reason to buy this lens. It's really not going to do that that much better than the f1.4 lens does.
Maybe just work out a little bit more, I don't know. But that sharpness is, it's so amazing. You gotta try it.